Hello everyone and welcome back once again to the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage YouTube channel. You are looking at the debut, I think, of my Pfaff model number 6. This is one of the few Pfaff models you've ever seen me work on. I don't come across them very often, and when I do, I have to be very careful when I purchase them. And the reason for that is that getting parts for Pfaffs can be more of a challenge. This is true of Berninas, this is true of Husqvarnas that were made in Sweden, and of course the Berninas beautifully made in Switzerland. But I came across one of these and it has a certain provenance. It is, I got it from the household of the original owner who got it brand new. And as I was going through the restoration of this machine, I noticed that there was a very minute amount of carbon dust, that black sort of soot that builds up on the commutator of the motor. The commutator is the ring in the sewing motor that the sewing brushes push against. And typically, the more carbon that there is, the more use the machine has had. It's it's kind of a ballpark estimate. But this one had very little, and I don't believe it was ever taken in and serviced anywhere. In fact, I have a suspicion that when this machine was purchased, that the original owner probably didn't take to it. You know, when people used to sew, they would sew for lots of projects back in the day for hours and hours. Some people did if they liked sewing or they found the need to. And when you work with a machine, and all of you know this when you're test driving automobiles, some things just are a better fit for you and the way you like to use the machine, in this case a sewing machine. And this machine reminds me of my very first machine that you see on the cover of my channel there, that Singer 301 with the two-tone color scheme. It had almost no wear. So this machine was asleep. Now you might think, well, if it wasn't worn and hardly used, why did it take so much effort to wake it up? Sewing machines like to be used. They like to run, and when they sit, especially for long periods, it doesn't matter whether it had no wear originally or if it was used well. If it sits long enough, it's going to fall asleep. And this machine was very asleep. When I first got it, you may recall, I was trying to, I could not get, this is the stitch length lever, I couldn't get it to move. And I didn't even try to move the reverse lever. I didn't dare try to do that. So eventually I was able to get that loosened. It took, in fact, I don't know how many videos I made just on this here. Because remember, the steel behind the machine has to be dealt with. You never ever want to overstress plastic, because when plastic and steel go head to head, you know which one's going to win, and it's not the plastic. Same thing happened with the little knob that is attached to the mechanism that lowers the feed dogs. And the fact that this was frozen and really asleep did not surprise me. Almost every machine I ever touch has, you don't start moving knobs or levers. You have to go underneath and get that part loosened, because many people never used them from the time the machines were new. It was a feature that was there historically, because way back in the day, people wanted to do either free motion embroidery, or more often they wanted to do mending, like when you darn a sock, or if they had especially any kind of fabric with a hole in it, you could patch it. People were very, very thrifty back in the day. And so, but over time, you might be an exception to this, but many people quit using that device. So again, I have light fixture, works great. You turn the light, there's a little collar around the light fixture. You turn it toward you for on and away from you for off. And if you're not sure how yours works, again, you never want to force things. So I have threaded the machine, and we are going to see if it is all that, or is it a big yawn? I don't know. People are very people have their favorites. They have certain brands of machine they like, and that's what they like. There are people You know, in my own community, it's either a Pfaff or nothing, or a Singer or nothing, and you can go on down the line. And other people don't care. They just want a machine that works. Now, what we're going to do here is I am going to mention to you what I have done to get this set up. The most important thing that I have done is I have found a piece of leather. This is a scrap. This is I bought a little bag of leather scraps at the craft store. And this one, if you look at it, you'll see I've got 2 layers here. And it is very pliable, right? Right? You can wiggle it like that. And if you can fit it under the presser foot, then you may there are no guarantees, but you may be able to get some good sewing on leather. Just remember that all sewing machines, even the mighty Pfaff, over-engineered with these wonderful German parts, every machine has limits. So you want to be careful with that. The other thing that can really help is to install a leather-tipped needle. And that can really make a difference. And it's not hard to get. They're not expensive. Now these I had ordered some time ago. This is the Organ brand. Most of them are made in Japan. A few of them are made in, I believe, Thailand. Now, keep in mind that for most people in North America, you will see brands like Schmetz. You might see some Singer needles that are for leather. Normally, the needle package will tell you, it will say leather or LTR. The Organ company, they abbreviate it. Notice it says 15 by 1 LR. So, sometimes they abbreviate things, but that's what this is. I have a size 18, pretty good size. They come in different sizes, but they should fit. These are not industrial needles. They should fit any home sewing machine, new or vintage for that matter, for the most part. Now, why? When you have needle types, you have needles made for different kinds of fabrics. Leather has a different challenge for a machine than do wovens or knits or fine fabrics like silks and lace. So can you sew leather without a leather tip needle? Well, you can, and you might do okay. But if you're going to go to the trouble to sew something made of leather, you might want to give your machine the best setup it has. And that is the ideal situation for your machine to sew leather, because the tips of the needle, okay, they are designed to pierce leather. And you will discover that whatever machine you're using should be able to sew that material a little more willingly, shall we say. All right, so since I've yapped on long enough, let's see what the machine will do for us. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to shift things a bit here and give you all a bit of a close-up view here so you can get a little better view of what's going on with the needle. So I have 2 colors of thread. I typically, or I try, as often as possible to have 2 different colors because it's easier to see what the stitches are doing. It's good for me and it's good for you if you're trying to figure out how balanced your stitches are. So the bottom thread is sort of a purple color. The upper thread is this sort of turquoise color, for lack of a better word. So what I'm going to do, and this is something, some of you may do this or not, but one thing you can do is you can have your bobbin thread, in this case the purple thread, and you can have that underneath your 2 layers of whatever it is you're sewing. In this case it's leather. And then with your upper thread, go ahead, once you've gotten your needle threaded, go ahead and get it underneath the presser foot. But you'll notice I could have just left both threads underneath and it would work. In fact, and I never really paid attention until recently. But you may discover that it's slightly easier for getting your stitches going if you do this. Now, I don't need the electric light on. By the way, this machine sews perfectly fine when it's plugged in. If you want the light, you can turn it on separately. You don't have to have the light on when you're sewing with this machine. And that's true of most machines from this time period. Now, before I begin, before I get on this lovely Pfaff accelerator, as I like to call it. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and pull my needle down, okay? Because remember, when you're asking a machine to do something for you, and you might notice some oil trickling down. Again, when I restore machines, I often have put more oil in than you normally ever would because they are so dry. And that will, it will work itself out as I go through the testing. So I've went ahead and got a few stitches going here, right? And I'm going to start with my needle in down and in the material. You can do this with whether it's leather or maybe you've got a heavy fabric. You don't have to do it, but some sewers have told me that it can help when you're starting, when you're getting something started. And then I am going to, I've got it on the longest stitch, and I'm going to simply start slow. And we'll test the reverse. There it goes. Reverse worked beautifully. And now I'm going to start slow, but I'll speed it up a little bit. My philosophy on speed, as many of you know, is that when you're sewing leather or heavy fabrics, you don't have to go super slow, but don't floor it. I mean, you're asking the machine to chew on a really thick sandwich here. So, all right, we'll go ahead. And come back over. And if the needle stops in the up position, remember there's no computer telling it where to stop, I'll just put it right back down on the material. And I will tilt up for a moment. You can see when I went into reverse, I simply, while the machine was working, I simply tilted up in the direction of the arrow and it did its job. And then I put it back. This, by the way, does not swivel back. It doesn't just snap back. So I have not seen a spring in here. Remember that, and this is true on many of the straight stitch singers, when you go into reverse, you have to physically put it in reverse and then change it yourself. It's not spring loaded. Some machines are, but I don't believe this one is. Please correct me if you know otherwise. All right, so I'm going to put it down to 3 here, see what it does. Now I'm going to move my stitch length over to 2, see what it does. All right. Moment of truth, everyone. I have been working on this machine for weeks because I have intentionally gone at a pace, tried to practice what I preach to all of you, taking time. Let's take a look and see what we've got here. So, above, I believe this was my first row of stitches, lovely, consistent. This little section here, of course, is where I back tacked or went into reverse. So that's not an issue with the stitch. And then I came around. And then I shortened my stitch a little bit. Now the differences between number 5 and number 3, well, they don't seem to be that different. If I look at the stitch here and down here, I see a little bit of difference. Remember, this is not a digital thing. Then I came all the way down to number 2, and when you go from 5 to 2, you see more of a difference in the stitch length. Remember, all of this changing of stitch length is done mechanically, but they are consistent. And like I said, if you're used to a modern machine, you may think, wow, even the longest stitch doesn't look that long. But again, historically, we know that as we go through the decades of sewing machine engineering design, they would eventually um, make stitches longer. I've had 1970s Kenmores where the stitches are a lot longer than sometimes than you see on some of the earlier machines. So I am pleased that this machine has come back to life. When it finds a new home and has a new owner, they should get a lot of life out of it because, well, it didn't get used much. But again, when something has been asleep for so long, you know, this is a machine I believe has been asleep probably longer. It's in the top 10% of how long it sat and just did not get used. And so remember, when you're waking up a machine, think about what it's like when you wake up in the morning. You know, do you just start doing sprints the moment you wake up? Maybe you do. But most people, you know, they're a little cloudy. They have to take time to wake up. And that is true for vintage sewing machines. So I hope this has been helpful for any of you who care to take a look at the Pfaff number 6 and my journey restoring it. I have never restored a Pfaff Model 6. I've worked on Pfaffs before. This machine is actually, it feels more like a Singer, and that's probably because it shares the Singer 15 class bobbin system. But I cannot emphasize enough that if you have something like this, any sewing machine, take your time. Going slow really paid off here. I don't know if anyone would want to buy this machine if it had a knob broken. Well, you got to have this one, right? It's kind of hard to use reverse without that. So, again, a machine that basically was asleep for decades, and it is awake. It just took a little patience. And hopefully, it will find a new home. I will be listing it soon. For those of you who love Pfaff machines, or maybe you've never heard of Pfaff machines, or maybe you're trying to figure out how to restore your own machine, feel free to put your comments down there below, and feel free to subscribe. There's no cost to do so. And I will see all of you next time.